May 1945, Germany surrenders, and with it ends the remarkable operational career of one of the Second World War's most versatile aircraft, the de Havilland Mosquito. Across airfields from Britain to Burma, hundreds of these wooden aircraft sit ready for missions that will never come. The RAF suddenly possesses thousands of the war's fastest bombers, and a reckoning begins about what to do with the legendary wooden wonder in a world of jet engines and peacetime budgets. In early May 1945, as victory in Europe became reality, the RAF operated approximately 1,200 Mosquitoes across dozens of squadrons. Fighter bombers, night fighters, photo reconnaissance variants, and bomber versions filled roles from pathfinding to precision strikes. The aircraft had proven itself adaptable, fast, and capable, flying missions no other type could match. But the armistice brought immediate questions about its future. By the time Japan surrendered in August 1945, over 7,700 Mosquitoes had been built across all variants in Britain, Canada, and Australia. Production lines at de Havilland's Hatfield facility and dispersed factories across Britain continued into 1946, fulfilling contracts placed during wartime. These late production aircraft rolled out into a transformed world, one where their wooden construction suddenly appeared outdated compared to all-metal jet designs already in development. The variety of Mosquito roles complicated post-war planning. Photo reconnaissance variants remained valuable for mapping and surveying. Night fighter versions still had defensive utility. Bomber variants faced uncertain futures as the RAF transitioned to heavy bombers like the Lincoln and emerging jet technology. Unlike single-role aircraft that could be retired wholesale, the Mosquito's versatility meant different variants faced different fates. At maintenance units across Britain, RAF officers assessed each airframe's condition and remaining service life. Some Mosquitoes showed minimal wear, having entered service late in the war. Others displayed combat damage, accumulated flight hours, or structural concerns from intensive operations. The wooden airframes presented unique challenges. Unlike metal aircraft that aged predictably, Mosquitoes required inspection for wood deterioration, glue joint failure, and moisture damage that could compromise structural integrity. The immediate post-war period saw the RAF maintain significant Mosquito numbers. Britain still faced commitments across a global empire, and the Mosquito's range, speed, and operational flexibility remained valuable. However, peacetime budgets and the push toward jet aircraft meant the type's days were numbered from the moment the war ended. As demobilization began, the RAF launched programs to determine which Mosquitoes to keep and what roles they would fill. The aircraft that had been indispensable in wartime now had to prove its value in peace, competing against cheaper training aircraft and more capable jets. For limited funding. Unlike the wholesale scrapping of some wartime types, the Mosquito received an extended operational life in several specialized roles. The RAF recognized capabilities that remained useful even as the service modernized around it. Photo reconnaissance Mosquitoes found immediate post-war employment. The PR variants had been among the war's best reconnaissance aircraft, capable of reaching deep into enemy territory at speeds and altitudes that made interception difficult. After 1945, these capabilities translated perfectly to peacetime mapping, survey work, and intelligence gathering. RAF reconnaissance squadrons flew Mosquitoes throughout the late 1940s, photographing Britain's colonies, mapping territories, and conducting surveillance missions as Cold War tensions emerged. The PR-34 variant, representing the pinnacle of Mosquito reconnaissance development, served into the early 1950s. These aircraft surveyed everything from African territories to potential Soviet targets, their wooden construction irrelevant when speed and altitude remained their primary defenses. Training roles absorbed substantial Mosquito numbers. The RAF faced a challenge. Maintaining pilot proficiency on multi-engine aircraft during peacetime meant finding suitable trainers. Mosquitoes, despite their high performance, served this function at various training units. Pilots transitioning to jets or maintaining multi-engine ratings flew Mosquitoes, though the type's operating costs made this an expensive training solution. Target towing emerged as another post-war role. The Mosquito's speed made it ideal for towing aerial targets, allowing fighter pilots and anti-aircraft gunners to train against realistic, fast-moving objectives. TT-35 variants were specifically converted for this mission, serving with target towing units into the 1950s. The work was unglamorous compared to wartime bombing raids, but it kept airframes flying and crews employed. Night fighter variants maintained operational status longer than bombers. The NF-36, the final Mosquito night fighter variant, entered service after the war ended and operated into the early 1950s. These aircraft provided air defense at a time when Britain's jet night fighters were still developing. The Mosquito's radar equipment, handling characteristics, and crew experience made it a capable interim solution. Experimental and test roles absorbed other examples. The Royal Aircraft Establishment and various research facilities used Mosquitoes for testing equipment, trialling modifications, and conducting flight research. Some aircraft tested new engines, others evaluated radar systems, or served as chase planes for experimental types. These specialized roles kept small numbers flying well beyond the type's frontline retirement. The RAF also converted some Mosquitoes for new missions never envisioned during wartime. Transport variants carried mail and passengers across Europe and to Mediterranean stations. Weather. Reconnaissance flights used modified examples to gather meteorological data. A few even served with the Empire Radio School, training navigators and wireless operators. However, this extended service came with escalating costs. Maintaining wooden airframes proved increasingly expensive as specialized knowledge became scarce and replacement materials difficult to source. The RAF operated supply chains optimized for metal aircraft. Mosquitoes required different expertise, different materials, and different maintenance philosophies that made them expensive outliers in the inventory. By 1950, the writing was clear. Jets were maturing rapidly. The Meteor, Vampire, and Canberra offered capabilities that made even the fastest Mosquito obsolete. The aircraft that had seemed irreplaceable in 1945 was becoming a maintenance burden by 1950. Its operational advantages eroded by technological progress, and its wooden construction a liability in the all-metal jet age. The transition away from Mosquitoes accelerated through the late 1940s and early 1950s. As squadrons re-equipped with jets and modern piston types, hundreds of wooden aircraft faced disposal. The RAF needed to clear storage facilities, reduce maintenance costs, and focus resources on the future. The Mosquito's time had passed. Maintenance units across Britain became processing centres for retired Mosquitoes. Aircraft arrived from squadrons were assessed for their remaining value and sorted into categories: retention for spare parts, foreign sale, conversion to other uses, or scrapping. The decision calculus was brutal. Metal aircraft could sit in storage for years with minimal deterioration. Mosquitoes could not. Their wooden structure, held together with casein glues developed for wartime production, began degrading the moment they stopped flying regularly. Moisture penetration, wood rot, and glue joint failure meant stored Mosquitoes had limited shelf lives. Storage fields at maintenance units filled with parked aircraft. Rows of Mosquitoes sat awaiting decisions on their fate. Some received minimal preservation efforts, cockpit sealed, engines preserved, control surfaces locked. Others simply sat exposed to British weather, their wooden structures slowly deteriorating. The RAF lacked storage facilities designed for wooden aircraft, and the cost of building them couldn't be justified for a type being phased out. Scrapping began almost immediately. Maintenance units established procedures for dismantling Mosquitoes systematically. Usable components were salvaged: engines, instruments, radios, and specialized equipment. The wooden airframes themselves had limited scrap value compared to metal aircraft. Some were burned, others were broken up and hauled away. The speed of elimination shocked observers who remembered the type's wartime reputation. By 1948, hundreds of Mosquitoes had been scrapped. The process accelerated as storage costs mounted and more aircraft transitioned to retirement. Unlike German armor, which required deliberate destruction as part of occupation policy, Mosquitoes simply became economically unviable. The RAF couldn't justify the cost of maintaining them when jet aircraft offered better performance and metal types provided easier logistics. Environmental factors complicated storage and disposal. Airfields filled with deteriorating wooden aircraft presented fire hazards. Rotting structures attracted pests. Local authorities wanted them removed. In some cases, Mosquitoes were simply pushed into piles and burned, eliminating the fire risk and clearing valuable apron space. The foreign market absorbed some examples. Several countries acquired surplus Mosquitoes for their own air forces, offering Britain a way to clear inventory while supporting allied nations or Commonwealth members. However, even foreign operators quickly discovered the challenges of maintaining wooden aircraft in tropical climates or environments lacking British industrial support. Conversion programs saved a handful from immediate scrapping. Some Mosquitoes were modified for civilian use, particularly in roles where their speed and range offered commercial value. However, civilian operators faced the same maintenance challenges the RAF encountered, and most civilian Mosquitoes had short service lives before economic reality forced their retirement. The Australian-built Mosquitoes faced similar fates. Production in Australia had created variants tailored to Pacific theatre requirements, but post-war, these aircraft encountered tropical conditions that accelerated wooden structure deterioration. The RAF retired their Mosquitoes quickly, with most scrapped by the early 1950s. By 1955, frontline Mosquito operations had essentially ceased worldwide. A few examples lingered in test roles or with specialized units, but the type's operational career was over. The aircraft that had seemed revolutionary in 1940 was obsolete 15 years later, a victim of rapid technological advancement and the practical limitations of wooden construction. The elimination phase was remarkably thorough. Thousands of Mosquitoes simply vanished, broken up for scrap, burned, or left to rot. The speed of this destruction reflected post-war pragmatism. Britain needed to focus on the future, not maintain expensive wooden relics of wartime innovation. While most Mosquitoes were destroyed, a small number survived through foreign sales, civilian conversion, or early preservation efforts. These survivors illustrate both the aircraft's continued capability and the mounting challenges of keeping wooden machines airworthy. Export sales distributed Mosquitoes worldwide. The Dominion Air Forces received examples. New Zealand, South Africa, and others operated the type briefly. The French Air Force acquired Mosquitoes, using them for colonial operations in Indochina and North Africa. Israel purchased surplus examples, operating them during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, where their speed proved valuable for bombing and reconnaissance missions. Sweden operated Mosquitoes extensively, purchasing examples during and after the war. The Swedish Air Force kept Mosquitoes flying into the 1950s, longer than most operators, using them for reconnaissance and training. However, even Sweden eventually faced the maintenance burden and retired the type in favor of metal aircraft. The Belgian Air Force operated Mosquito night fighters, maintaining defensive capabilities while transitioning to jets. Yugoslavia received examples through various channels. China operated both British-supplied and captured Japanese-built variants. Each operator confronted the same reality. Wooden aircraft required specialized maintenance that few could sustain long-term. Civilian conversions offered hope for extended service life. Several British companies purchased surplus Mosquitoes, converting them for aerial survey work, executive transport, or racing. The aircraft's speed and range appealed to operators seeking performance that conventional civilian types couldn't match. However, the challenges proved insurmountable for most. Maintenance costs exceeded revenue. Parts became impossible to source. Insurance companies balked at covering wooden aircraft. By the mid-1950s, most civilian Mosquitoes had been grounded or crashed, victims of the same structural deterioration that plagued military examples. A few notable civilian conversions lasted longer. BOAS used Mosquitoes briefly for high-speed mail runs. Survey companies operated photo reconnaissance variants in Africa and Canada, where their capabilities justified the expense. Racing enthusiasts converted bomber variants, stripping weight and pushing engines to achieve record speeds. These successes were exceptions that proved the rule. Wooden construction and peacetime economics didn't mix well. Crashes eliminated many survivors. The Mosquito's high performance demanded skilled handling, and post-war operators sometimes lacked the training wartime crews possessed. Structural failures from deteriorating wood and glue claimed others. Each crash reduced the surviving population, often taking with it rare variants or historically significant individual aircraft. By 1960, the attrition rate meant finding an airworthy Mosquito anywhere in the world had become increasingly difficult. Museum preservation efforts began slowly. In the early post-war years, few institutions recognized the need to preserve wartime aircraft. The pace of technological change made even recent types seem obsolete and disposable. By the time museums began actively seeking Mosquitoes for their collections, most had already been scrapped. The RAF Museum, Imperial War Museum, and similar institutions managed to secure examples, but often in poor condition, requiring extensive restoration. The wooden construction that made Mosquitoes vulnerable in service also complicated preservation. Museums accustomed to maintaining metal aircraft lacked expertise in wood conservation. Deterioration continued even in indoor displays as glues failed and wood dried out or absorbed moisture. Restoring Mosquitoes to display quality required specialists in wooden aircraft construction, a skill set that became increasingly rare as those with wartime experience aged. International museums acquired examples through various means. Canada's aviation museums preserved Canadian-built variants. Australia retained examples of local production. New Zealand's Air Force Museum displayed Mosquitoes that had served in the Pacific. The Smithsonian in Washington secured examples for American collections. Each represented countless hours of restoration work, combating decades of neglect and deterioration. Private collectors entered the preservation effort later. By the 1970s and 1980s, wealthy aviation enthusiasts began seeking wartime aircraft for personal collections. Mosquitoes, being relatively rare, commanded high prices when examples became available. Some collectors focused on restoration to flying condition, an enormously expensive undertaking given the specialized woodwork required. Others settled for static display, preserving airframes that flying would destroy. The restoration of Mosquitoes to airworthy status became a specialized field requiring extraordinary resources. Unlike metal aircraft, where structural repairs followed established procedures, wooden construction demanded craftsmen skilled in aviation-grade woodworking vintage adhesives, and fabric covering techniques. Each restoration could take years and cost millions, making flying mosquitoes among the most expensive warbirds to maintain. Today, approximately 30 mosquitoes survive in museums worldwide, a tiny fraction of the 7,700 built. Of these, fewer than 5 are airworthy, and those fly rarely to preserve irreplaceable structures. The contrast with metal contemporaries is striking. Hundreds of Spitfires survive. Dozens of Lancasters and B-17s exist in museums or flying condition. The Mosquito's wooden construction ensured that time would be its final enemy, more destructive than flak or fighters. Each surviving example represents not just one aircraft, but the entire production run and operational history of a type that helped win the war. Museums treat them as priceless artifacts, knowing that losing one to accident or deterioration would be irreplaceable. The few that fly do so under strictly controlled conditions, with pilots specially trained and maintenance crews expert in wooden aircraft systems. Restoration projects continue to discover mosquitoes in unlikely places. Occasionally, an airframe emerges from storage, discovered in a barn or warehouse where it sat forgotten for decades. Crashed examples are sometimes recovered from remote sites, though usually too damaged for anything beyond static display. Each find generates excitement among aviation historians, even when the aircraft is beyond restoration, as components and data add to understanding of the type. The scarcity of flying mosquitoes has made public appearances extraordinary events. When one of the airworthy examples performs at an air show, crowds gather to witness what few ever expected to see again. A wooden aircraft from 1940s technology, still capable of the performance that made it legendary. The sound of twin Merlin engines, the distinctive shape, and the knowledge of its improbability create moments that connect modern audiences to wartime history. What becomes clear in examining mosquito survivors is how close the type came to complete extinction. Had preservation efforts begun even a few years later, virtually nothing would remain. The rapid scrapping of the late 1940s, combined with natural deterioration, created a perfect storm of destruction. That any survive at all reflects the dedication of individuals and institutions who recognized historical value, when most saw only obsolete wood and glue. The story of mosquitoes after 1945 is ultimately one of rapid technological obsolescence combined with unique structural vulnerability. The aircraft that seemed revolutionary at its introduction was outdated within a decade, and its wooden construction ensured that, unlike metal contemporaries, it couldn't simply sit in storage awaiting reconsideration. The Mosquito had to fly or rot, and most rotted. In their rush to embrace jet technology and metal airframes, the RAF and other operators eliminated thousands of mosquitoes with barely a second thought. By the time the historical importance became clear, the vast majority had already been burned, buried, or left to decay. The handful preserved in museums represent less than half of 1% of all mosquitoes built. Fragments of a legend that grew larger even as the machines themselves disappeared. Modern efforts to document mosquito history continue. Researchers seek out surviving components, interview veterans who flew or maintained them, and compile data from scattered archives. Each piece of information adds to understanding a type that defined wooden aircraft construction at its peak, while simultaneously demonstrating why that construction method couldn't survive into the jet age. The practical problem nobody considered in 1945 was that wooden wonders don't age gracefully. Metal aircraft could be mothballed, stored, and reactivated. Wooden aircraft demanded constant care or accepted inevitable decay. The Mosquito's rapid disappearance after World War II wasn't just about jet engines or changing military requirements. It was about the fundamental incompatibility between organic materials and long-term aircraft preservation, a reality that cost the world most examples of one of the war's most remarkable aircraft. If you found this video insightful, watch what happened to Britain's Lancaster bombers after World War II next. It explores how the RAF's most famous heavy bomber transitioned from wartime operations to peacetime roles, and why more Lancasters survived than Mosquitoes despite facing similar retirement pressures. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more. Thanks for watching.